Chapnick, our president, is at a family celebration in California. So unfortunately, she couldn't be here today. And for those of you, because I do see some new faces in the audience, I just want to tell you that what the local summit is. The local summit was founded in 1995. It's a volunteer community organization that works to facilitate dialogue and collaboration among government, schools, nonprofits, businesses, and citizens. And it does this through its monthly public meetings where issues of local concern are addressed. And it's a group that shows up, and I know we're a community that shows up over and over and over again. And some of our past programs were on fighting food waste, meeting the needs of families in crisis, and managing personal flood risk, which I know is top of mind for many of our community members. And our upcoming meeting on January 9th, which hopefully will also be here at WJC, who has generously provided the space for all of us to meet. And that meeting will be a local's guide to aging well, resources, programs, and strategies for successful aging. This morning's meeting continues the local summit's long-standing practice of hosting the county executive to speak about the county budget, as well as other matters impacting the county and our community. And as I said, all of our meetings are 1 hour with a hard stop at 9 a.m. If there are questions that you didn't have the opportunity to ask, I know that George would welcome your emails to ask those questions. So with that, I want to turn the meeting over to Mamaroneck, who will be moderating the conversation with our county executive, and thank you all for being here today.
Good morning. Can you hear, is this clear? Am I coming through clear? Did someone say they can't hear me? Okay, I assume you can. First of all, I want to thank the audience for being, coming out today. This is our first in-person meeting in a very long time, and I know it's appropriate. I think that it's further than that. I'm now county executive. Isn't that impressive? George has been advocating and encouraging us to go back to in-person meetings for a while, so I think it's kind of nice that our first in-person meeting, he's our guest. I want to say thank you to the audience for coming, to George for coming. He's come every year for every year that I think he's been county executive. And actually, the tradition of inviting the county executive to our summit meetings started when Rob Estorino was county executive. So it's been going on for a long time, and I think it's a really important, it's an important visit. It's an opportunity for the community to ask their questions. Very important thank you goes to the Westchester Jewish Center. The diner, for a lot of different reasons, was no longer practical for us, and so we needed to find a new home, and we've spent a while looking for a home, and the Westchester Jewish Center came forward and said, take our facility and no charge. That was really very nice too. And then they throw in coffee and water, which is pretty impressive. So anyway, we picked December in part because it's budget time, and so there's a lot of questions. The way we work this is we draft a series of questions that are, we think, important to the community and to the members of our board. And I think I sent it to you last week. I usually send it a week or two in advance, so George has had our questions. And we will go through them one by one. When we finish the questions, we will have time for a Q&A. At that time, Rena will have the mic, and if you have a question, raise your hand, and at the start of your question, please identify yourself so we have a nice, clear record. And I think that's all the housekeeping. So with no further...
Before you ask the first question, let me just say hello?
I was going to say that.
Hello.
Hello.
As Nina pointed out, this is our first in-person meeting since COVID. COVID's 3.5 years. And I have been personally coming to the summit for almost all those 30 years. I hate to date myself, but the bottom line is that I've represented Larchmont and Mamaroneck in some capacity since 1992. And it has been a long relationship, so much so that although I don't live in these communities, I have had offices in these communities. I feel very much at home when I'm in Larchmont Village, Mamaroneck Village, around town. And so it's really nice to be able to see people, because one of the great things about the summit was the personal interaction. It was Jeff getting up to do tidbits. He'd ask questions, trivia questions, and we'd look at each other, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, do you know what it is? So I really do hope that this is the trend line of being able to do these things in person, because whenever the next one is, if it's next month or 2 months or whatever it is, I intend to be in the audience listening to the best of my ability. We get into the questions. To be honest with you, I make the practice of not reading the questions in advance. Even though I get them, I know Nina's mad at me for saying that. But I think you get a more honest answer rather than you sitting and saying, some sort of rote response. But I do have a secret weapon in the audience. Emily Saltzman, who's a resident of the community, is our Deputy Director of Operations. And she has a telepathic way of informing me if I'm saying something incredibly wrong or stupid. I can look at her and she gives me that look. Now, only my wife gives me that look. And if you have a spouse, you know what I'm talking about. But in all seriousness, Emily is a critical member of the team. And if I do make a misstatement of fact, which is possible, Emily will catch me on it, because I do want to make sure I give you accurate information as we answer the questions. So, Nina, thank you.
Okay. The first question we had has to do with county finances. You recently announced your proposed county budget for 2024. It provides for no increase in the Westchester County tax levy, and it also contains support for a number of initiatives and programs. What are your priorities with respect to the programs you proposed and support in the budget?
So to give you a quick overview of the budget, the Westchester County budget is a $2.4 billion budget. To put it in perspective, the state budget, Rachel Estroff is in the room, is 30 million, something like, maybe higher than that, Rachel. So the state budget is about 100 times larger than the county budget is. And then, of course, you have, Sabrina Fiddleman is from the front desk, the town budget is in the millions of dollars. So it gives you sort of a proportion, $2.4 billion. That $2.4 billion in the budget that we submitted, almost the first question always asked is property taxes. What happens to my property tax levy? We do not increase the overall property tax levy from this year to last year, so it is a tax-freeze year. The last 4 years, we've reduced the property tax levy. So the amount of money that we are taking from property taxes to run the county government, it runs a little bit under $600 million, like 570-ish or so. She's nodding, so I guess I'm right. In the range of about 569, 562, something like that, is lower today than it was 5 years ago. However, we have other revenue sources, and that allows us to reach the $2.4 billion on expenditures and so forth. This budget maintains most, if not all, of the initiatives that we've launched over the last few years, and there are multiple initiatives. I know I did see a sort of topic as we talk about housing, employment, and so forth. So I'll let those questions answer some of those things. But the county government has a series of regional local functions, and those functions complement to the greatest extent what the villages and towns do. So the villages and towns provide local policing, the county provides regional policing. The local governments provide recreation, the county provides regional recreation. What do I mean by that? The county owns Saxon Woods, the county owns Playland, the county owns Reed Sanctuary, and other types of facilities that are open to everybody in the county, Glen Island, in this area of the county, of course all over the county. And the local governments have parks, recreation, the village of Mamaroneck, Nora can point to what they have at Florence Park and what they have certainly Harbor Island, the centerpiece of recreation, Flint Park, and so forth. So the regional, local reality of the county is what we provide in services. And we have parks, we treat sewage, you know about that, because we've got a sewer treatment plant right here in Mamaroneck and some of the other South Shore communities and on the Hudson. We have a public health department on display during COVID. probably a central activity. That's something local governments don't have. And the state, as a state health department, they require the county government to implement the health rules that they set. We have a mental health department that does certain kinds of functions and services that are essential. All of that is what's within the 2.4 billion. Many times the questions about the specific initiatives, many times the initiatives are things that go beyond what our basic mandated responsibilities are. As an example, we have a responsibility to implement a web of social service programs that are created by the federal government and the state government. Then, in addition, we go, as a county government, a step further. So what initiative do we have last year? This year, we've added, 2 years now, we've added money for food insecurity. $1.3 million in this budget. During COVID, when we had some additional COVID money, that number was a little bit higher because we got an even greater need. Many times, legislators bring up these needs. Catherine Parker, who serves us in the 7th District, has joined us, and she is an advocate for things that happen in this district. I represented this district a long time ago. Judy Myers in between us, and there are 16 other people who will have those types of things. So we have initiatives that are sometimes district-specific and sometimes more generic in the way we look at things. I know we're going to talk about housing, that's a big issue in a second. We put money in the capital budget as well as in an operating budget. Final point on the overall budget. We have special districts. There are 3 types of special districts: sewer districts, refuse districts, water districts. Every community is in a different place in terms of those things. There are a couple of communities in the northeastern corner of the county that are not part of any of these districts. They handle water, refuse, and sewage on their own. So if you know the map of Westchester, North Salem, Lewisboro, Somers, that area of the county are not part of any of these things. Down here in Larchmont and Mamaroneck, we're part of the sewer district, and we have a sewer treatment plant in Mamaroneck. But not all the sewage generated in the town and the villages goes to that plant. What happens in Larchmont goes to the New Rochelle plant. Why? I don't know. The Sparky decide the system. It's built on gravity, and I am told that in the day that it was created, it made more sense to have Larchmont sewage go down in a pipe into the New Rochelle plant than to have to, yes, pump it up into the Harbor Island plant. Go figure. But each of those sewer districts have different assets and different liabilities. And therefore, there's a different sewer rate that's established in each of those districts. What we have kept level is the general property taxes paid by everybody across the county. The special districts did have some increases, and they're different depending on the district that you're in. And keep in mind that when it gets to those special districts, organizations or entities that are tax exempt from paying taxes are not exempt from paying special district rates, because that is, in essence, a user fee. If you use the sewer system, you pay for using the sewer system. If you use the refuse portion of it, that's part of it. And the refuse system, I know we're answering the question, but the refuse that the county is responsible for, most people don't realize. If you live in either village or the town, it is a village or a town, well, the joint sanitation in one and in the other village comes to pick up your garbage on your street. They take the garbage to a transfer station, and then the municipal roll is over, and the county's responsible to take the garbage and the recyclables from the transfer station and then bring it to its final resting place, which would be the material recovery facility, that's for the recyclables, or the Yonkers, or all the way up to Willebrator, which has a new name, I forget the new name of it, up in Charles Point, Peekskill, to go, to be disposed of by burning into energy. And the more expensive part of getting rid of your garbage is the part that the county picks up, but you don't see it because you see the village truck pick up your garbage, say, well, the village is getting rid of my garbage. And they are, they're spending a lot of money on their portion of it, and the county spends even more. That's why we have the refuse district. Now that I've utterly confused you, what I hope you understand by the answer to the question is that while we are not anywhere near as complex as the state or the federal government, the county is pretty damn complex. And so when somebody says, what happened to my taxes? And when we can say we've lowered them a little bit the last 4 years, or we've frozen this year, it ain't easy. It's not easy. It took a lot of hard work, a lot of cooperation, legislative and executive branch, all the professionals that we have that run each of these different departments. And so to say that we're able to operate another year without raising your taxes is no picnic. But that's what we've done in this budget.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the housing question. I'll read you our question. The cost of housing, high property taxes, and overall high expenses in the county are persistent problems. It makes it very difficult for lower-income persons to continue to live here and hard for older residents to remain. It also discourages young persons from moving here and thus depleting the business community of a vibrant labor market. What steps do you feel the county can and should take to address both the housing problem and the high cost of living here? Did the counties set aside money for affordable housing last year translate into additional units, and how many?
First of all, our administration came into office January 2018, made a major change from the predecessor administration. The predecessor administration did not believe that the county had a direct role to play in affordable housing. They fought an agreement that was made between the county and the federal government from the administration prior to that, and they went to court to try to get out of the obligation to be involved in affordable housing. They lost that court battle after an extended period of time, and as part of that, the federal government punished Westchester by eliminating certain federal programs. We came in January of 2018, completely different philosophy. We believe there is a county role to play in affordable housing. The first 2 to 3 sentences of that question is the philosophy that we operate under, that we have an affordable housing crisis, and we have to do what we can do as a county government to help alleviate that. In the process of doing that, we have a couple of structural realities that we face. The short-term answer is the budget that we passed has $90 million of capital money set aside to do 2 things that we have done over the last couple of years of our administration, which weren't done in prior administrations, and a third thing that was created for the first time in this budget. The 2 things that we've done before with that $90 million allocation is to provide money to help acquire land in order to build affordable housing on it. And then number 2, to provide money to help in the process of infrastructure improvements that may be necessary for a piece of land to be used for affordable housing. Jane Eny is in the room, your town supervisor, she and the town board, as the other members are here, Robin Lachinsky and so forth. They are trying mightily to come up with a site that they believe they can do a certain number of units of affordable housing. About 40, Jane can speak to it if the question is more specific. They have come to the county looking for financial assistance to do that. That $90 million is the pot of money that will be used to help them accommodate the needs that they have there. And the site might have, rock on it that has to be blasted out. It might need an extension of a sewer pipe. You might have to curb the area. Those are infrastructure-related needs. The purchase of the land is important. If you have county-owned land, or for that matter, municipally owned land, and then you contribute to build affordable housing on it, there's no land acquisition cost. But if you're buying a piece of land that's available to be sold, you're competing against the private market, which will pay a higher rate to get that piece of land. We don't know how expensive land is in this area. And if somebody says, look, I can go in there and I can build 40 units of market rate housing and get $3,000 a month of rent, how are we going to be able to pay the same amount to buy the land and then charge $1,200 a month, if that's an imaginary number, for affordability factor? So you need something to bridge that money. That's what some of that $90 million goes for. Those are 2 things we've done over the last number of years. The third thing that was created this year, I credit Joan McDonald, Emily, and the operations team, and the people they consulted with. They came up with a legal way for us to use public money to help bridge the gap in financing a project. And that's important, because a developer, and maybe some of them even know this certainly better than I do, they would say, when you go to a bank to get a loan, construction loan, to buy and construct a project, you show a certain revenue stream. And that revenue stream gives the bank a reason to loan you the money, because you can pay it back, right? Sometimes those numbers don't match up, because you want to have a lower price for the individual to pay for rent, which lowers the amount of money that you're going to have as revenue. How are you going to pay back the note if you don't have enough revenue? A flex fund that the county does can help fill that gap. Now, it has to make sense in terms of the number of units, and it has to make sense in terms of the amount of money allocated. It's not an unlimited fund. But that concept, that flex fund concept, I hope I've explained it properly, is something that has never been done in the county before. So you take the other 2 things that I said, land acquisition, infrastructure, and now flex fund, and the county becomes a partner. When the village of Mamaroneck, or the town of Mamaroneck, or the village of Larchmont says, we think we can do an affordable project And it may not be all affordable. It could be partially affordable. It could be X number of units, the total number of units, X number affordable. If we think the numbers work out, then that money in this budget will help make those things happen. We have one other tool as well, and that is Industrial Development Agency funding, IDA funding. IDA funding allows us, for a development, to obviate certain taxes that they would have to pay, sales tax, mortgage recording tax, yada, yada. By obviating that much taxes, it makes the numbers work for the development, and in return, if it's housing, because many times IDAs for other purposes, job creation and so forth, IDA funding will help make the project work if you give us so many units of affordable housing. We used IDA funding to help that project in Harrison, that's right by the train station. You can't miss it if you go to downtown Harrison. It's a whole new downtown Harrison. That project had IDA money in it, and they gave us X number of units of affordability. Now, one more thing to say about housing. Affordable is a flexible concept. And there is a problem that we have, even when we develop affordable housing. As a magic number, we've done 2,500 units of affordable housing, thereabouts, during the course of this administration. That's 3 times as much as the predecessor administration did, and they have a little more time. I'm working off a 6-year base, they have an 8-year base. Our affordable results are greater than Nassau, Suffolk, Rockland, Dutchess, Orange, all the counties around us. And yet, affordability is defined as being at the upper end of 80% of average median income. Average median income in Westchester County is pretty high. And so when you do 80% of that, that's still 2 people working in relatively decent jobs. They can't afford market rate at 80%, so we make it affordable to them. But the need is greater the lower you go on that spectrum, down to 30%. And when you go below 30%, you're in the world of public housing, and the county does not have the resources necessary to meet that need. It's too great. And that's where you need assistance from the federal government. The state has been a very good partner with the county and with the local governments in meeting affordable projects in that range. Years ago, there was a crummy motel at the entrance to Homix. That was ditched, and now you have a beautiful complex. That was a great accomplishment in the days of Dolores Battaglia, Elaine Price, and Caroline Silverstone. What am I dating myself? They're all, contemporaries of mine, all doing something else with their lives. And that project is an affordable project to this day, permanent affordability. Washingtonville Housing Alliance has done a host of different things, some senior housing and some housing for families. The need is much greater than where we are today. 2,500 units doesn't cut it. We probably could do 12,000, 13,000, 14,000 units in this county to start to address the problem. But we're doing what we can within our resources, and then ultimately we need federal money. We need a federal commitment of dollars to help us reach that lowest possible level if we're going to address the issue in its entirety.
Thank you. Flooding, a topic near and dear to our hearts. The Sound Shore communities, especially Mamaroneck, are both shoreline communities and downstream of up-county developments, and are particularly vulnerable to flooding and what are becoming more common extreme weather events. Up-county development exacerbates the problem. The county passed a stormwater management law in 2011. Do you support creating stormwater districts based upon watersheds and using tax dollars from the districts to fund projects at the bottom of the watershed? Do you envision any other mechanism to protect the downstream communities from upstream overdevelopment, or to provide for financial reimbursement for those downstream who are adversely affected by overdevelopment, up-county, down-county problem?
In so many different issues, we can define it in a way that creates a war between communities. And the up-county, down-county thing is one of those types of things. The first most important thing to remember is that New York State is a home rule state. What we mean by that, and those of you who've been in public office, I see Maureen Colbert out there, and some who are active, and Lucas is currently active, there's others who've served before, Malcolm is here, serving the village board. Each local government determines its zoning, and McAndrews, zoning, planning, housing decisions are made by the local government. That's local control. So the village of Mamaroneck makes its decisions, the town of Mamaroneck makes its decisions, yada, yada, all along. So does the town of Somers, the town of Newcastle, the city of White Plains, the town village of Harrison, etc. When we talk about up county and down county, a community on the water, and I live in Rice City, it's also a waterfront community where the water comes through on its way out to the sound, feels poorly served by the decisions made by what are called up county or communities that are north of us. They're not actually all above 287, up county, as people who live here might say. It's like defining where's upstate New York. Where's it? 50 miles above wherever you are. You go to Poughkeepsie, I'm not in upstate New York. It's Albany. Go to Albany, we're not upstate. Go up to Glens Falls. It's the same true within the county. So I have heard this argument many times, and I can think of a particular person who makes it all the time, that somehow the reason why we have flooding is because of the development of White Plains and the development that we have in Harrison or someplace else, and that's the problem. The problem we have with flooding is topographical. We have developed everywhere more impervious surface because we want to see growth and development. I just said in the last question how I am for affordable housing, and that usually means multifamily housing, right? So if I'm for affordable housing, that means I'm developing perhaps a flat piece of land that might be used to absorb water when it drains off. So there's a certain conflict of priorities that hit us when we do the flooding. To me, the core issue, and I know we framed the question, should there be projects that the up-county communities contribute to that? We have to look at the flooding problem as what it is and solve the flooding problem, and we need money to do it. Whether the up-county communities are part of that solution or not is hopeful, but not as relevant. We have major problems, and we know it, everywhere. I was looking 2-3 weeks ago at some of the co-ops that are along Palmer Avenue that cross from Larchmont into New Rochelle, and how they got hammered by water. Where did the water come from? It came off of the MTA tracks behind it, because there's a slope. And the drainage off of that goes right into their backyard. And then if you look at the topography, Palmer Avenue, I'm sitting in Larchmont, looking toward New Rochelle, the road from Palmer Avenue goes down, it creates a valley. And in that valley, when the water comes fast and there's a high tide, and the water can't drain out normally, it just goes up like this. And I saw the damage on the first floor in all of these different properties. People are beside themselves, unhappy, and what happened in that piece of flooding has nothing to do with up-county anything. It has to do with physical improvements that are needed and that site to reduce flooding. So the question in my mind is, what do we do about it and how do we do it quickly? The first thing is that each community, and in your 3 communities, you already have efforts underway. Some communities, not as much. Each community has to analyze what the flooding priority problems are in their community, prioritize them, because we don't have, all of us do not have enough money to do all the things necessary. Figure out what are the most important things to do in the villages and in the town. And then have a necessary study to identify not just this is a problem, but what can be done to fix it. Because that's one of the other problems. When you get a high tide out in the sound, where does the water go? Pump it out to the waiver. And where does it get out to the sound if the water's coming in the sound? So I turn to the world of engineering, which I know minimally, and say, okay, tell us what is the best strategy that we have for the Pine Brook section of Larchmont? What's the best strategy we have for the 2 rivers that meet in Columbus Park and Mamaroneck? And the engineers come back and they say, initially, for $80 million, we'll do a masterful plan that will reduce, but not eliminate flooding. Not eliminate. Because if you get enough water in a short enough period of time, it will still back up and flood. It can't get out, we use the Columbus Park example because that's where money's been identified and allocated. It can't get out of the corridor from Halsted Avenue out to the sound fast enough. It ponds up in Columbus Park, and then it backs up Mamaroneck River, it backs up the Sheldrake River, and the First Baptist Church in Howard floods constantly. In an ideal world, you buy the land, you tear it all down, those houses down, you compensate the people, and you say, this house is never going to be flood-free on Howard. It's never going to be flood-free. Or you spend $250,000 per house and you raise it up. That's happened in Rye, in a wealthy section of Rye called Indian Point. On Wapanoka Avenue and Mendota Avenue, those houses are worth multiple millions. People have the resources to invest the $250,000, $300,000 it takes to raise the house. House looks a little funky from the street, but it's a beautiful house. All the mechanicals are up a level, and they won't be lost, and when the flood comes, it won't affect those homeowners. So what is our answer? We use the example of Mamaroneck. So that $80 million project at last look is about 110, nor is that the last number you've heard, 110, 120 million. We started out, Catherine Parker and myself, committing $10 million to that project. Now the county's committed $17 million to that project. Is that the number, Catherine, that we're working on?
21 million.
Oh, we're up to 21 million. Did we put that in the budget, Emily? The extra 4? So the bottom line is, what is the county doing about flooding? For the sake of Mamaroneck, in one project, we're committing $21 million of county money in capital for that one project. Multiply it out. Jane of the Mamaroneck Town Board now is, I believe, in the process of getting a research project completed that will identify all the flooding, the Myrtle Boulevard flooding that I hear about, the Murray Avenue flooding. It's everywhere. The villages in the village of Larchmont are the same. Now, multiply this by the fact that there's flooding in Rye, there's flooding in Yonkers, there's flooding in Bronxville, there's flooding in Mount Kisco, there's flooding in you name it, we got it. And on those days when the water stops falling, I get in my car, I don't have the cops driving me around. I drive around myself, I get out of the car, I walk, and I walk. I'm standing with the county legislator of that area, the village trustee of that area, looking, and I'm saying, yep, this is bad. And how much more is that going to take? We need, I know I sound like a crybaby, but we need state and even more so federal assistance to make these things happen. If you go back traditionally on most of these improvements, the federal government would pay 80 to 90% of an improvement, and then there's a local match of 10%. The county and the town and the village together can make a match of 10 to 20%. And we can't go much beyond that. And the frustration is that even if we stopped building tomorrow, we didn't build one more stitch of anything anywhere. If you get Hurricane Ida, which was a real eye-opener for me, we heard, if you remember this, I don't stretch it out, but it's important, I think, for you to understand. We heard about Hurricane Henri 2 weeks before Hurricane Ida in August. It's coming. Hurricane Henri is going to be terrible. Get ready for Hurricane Henri. We went, all of our local governments went to the ready to go. Hurricane Henri came through, wasn't too bad, it was fine. Hurricane Ida made landfall in New Orleans and started coming up the Mississippi Valley like sort of a rain event. Only when it got here, it hung around the night of September 1st into September 2nd, and it caused more problems than we could have imagined that Hurricane Henri could have caused. And in that moment, we had the kind of flooding that was off the chart. As a county official, the answer is we put capital aside, the local governments do the research, they put together the plan, this is what we need. So Larchmont Village, Mamaroneck Town, Mamaroneck Village, George, this is what we need. What can the county do? The county helps you with the cost of the study at some level, and then we commit some amount of capital, and then we go to the state, and Shelley and Steve have been champions. Steve Owens particularly has an expertise in this area with water issues. When he comes to speak to you, he can get into details about what he's done up in Albany. And they come in with a bigger chunk of dough, and then at some point we fall short, and we have to have federal money to complement that. And let me say one more thing, because I served in the state legislature, as you know, in both houses. When you go into a room of 150 other assembly members or 63 other senators, and you say, Westchester needs money, what do you think you hear from Brooklyn and Buffalo? Take a wild guess. Every article will say, well, then Tony Mamaroneck can upscale Larchmont. And so you have to come to the dance as a legislator, armed with facts and figures. I'm barely looking at my notes as I speak to you. You've got to know it in here. And you've got to be able to explain it and express it and laugh and then be serious about it. This is what we need. And if we don't get that kind of money from the feds, 120 million now it's going to be in Mamaroneck. The county's 21 million. The state has probably an equal amount to the county. Probably they're doing 20 million, I assume, if they made the commitment. That's 80 million you need from the feds. And they have to function down there well enough so we actually get the money, or we'll never get the project.
Okay. The next question we had is about the water filtration plant and the land swap. Up to 100,000 residents depend on Westchester Joint Waterworks to provide clean, safe drinking water. There were violations of the maximum contaminant law. What is the status of the proposed land swap between the county and Westchester Joint Water Works that would enable the construction of a new water filtration plant on a county-owned parcel adjacent to the Westchester County Airport?
So if you live in the village of Larchmont, breathe a sigh of relief, because everybody else in the room has to listen to what I'm about to say. If you live in the town of Mamaroneck, or the village of Mamaroneck, or for that matter, Harrison, you get your water from Westchester Joint Water Works. That's your water agency. There's different ones for different places. I have Veolia that does Rybrook, Rye, Portchester. The water source for Westchester Joint Water Works is the water in behind the Kensico Dam and that reservoir. And the feds, for the reasons that you just mentioned, determined that that water needs to be filtered before it's sent to you. For many years, we were able to avoid filtration because we showed high levels of water quality. But the feds set certain standards, and those standards can't be met unless there's a filtration situation. So they have mandated, stay tuned, they mandated that be a filtration plant to filter the water that Westchester Water Works draws from Kensico Reservoir and puts into your tap. That filtration plant is not cheap, and it's a rather massive construction. The original site on Westchester Joint Water Works land was in the section of Harrison known as Purchase, a little closer to Anderson Hill Road and Purchase Street, if you know the geography. And there was community opposition to it. That's a shock. You know, that somebody said there's NIMBY, not in my backyard. There's also something called banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. Banana. And I have to tell you, on one level, I certainly understand that. You know, Taylor Lane in Rye Neck could be this and it could be that, but if you live on Taylor Lane, you don't want any of those things built around you, and you're going to come to the village board to tell them, I don't want this and I don't want that. I want a soccer field, I don't want that. So those residents have posed the first site. Westchester Joint Water Works says there's another possible site owned by the county, or the county airport land, and it's further north, close to Lake Street, Purchase Street, where it meets Lake Street, and that's the site that they wanted to deal with. They have had discussions through the leaders of those three communities, the Village of Mamaroneck, Town of Mamaroneck, Harrison. They're the members of the board. They agree. Let's ask Westchester for a land swap. They had to go through a whole bunch of review and environmental, blah, 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 and deal with the town of Harrison, which is the location of the situation. And then finally, last August, I believe, they conveyed to the county government all the documents and details asking for the land swap. What the county has to do simply is swap a piece of land that we own on the airport and give it to Westchester Joint Water Works, and they will go ahead and build a filtration plant, and we will take back the piece of land that they have. We have no particular land purpose for the land ourselves. What are the complications? Complication number one, the residents that live around the plant don't want it. And they don't want it big time, and they're ready to be litigious about it. They feel it's an infringement upon their world. There's a Quaker meeting house that's right on the corner. And the residents, not the residents, the congregants are objectionable to it. It's going to impact their worship. And they live in other parts of the county, and that's important to realize. So it takes a not my backyard, it kind of spreads it out. The town and the two villages want this done because there's a threat of fining from the state and the federal government if this treatment plant that's been mandated isn't built. I just spoke to the supervisor, Jane, yesterday, and I said, I am going to communicate directly to the state and the feds as the county executive and tell them no fines are warranted because it is being reviewed and adjudicated by the county board of legislators. Catherine, who's here in the room, all of these documents and materials were sent to the board. The board laid out a review plan. It's probably about a 6-month review, something like that, 8 months, whatever it is. It'll probably be resolved first quarter of next year. You can't tell the legislature what to do and when to do it. But at some point in time, I think in the first quarter of next year, maybe April of next year, they'll come to a decision. If they decide that yes, this plant can be built, then all we're doing is swapping the land. It's a simple swap. And I've said already, if the board passes this, it comes to me, I'll sign it, and then that's over. However, and this is very important for you to understand as Mamaroneck residents, there's a bigger problem that I have. It's not your problem, just like the Larchmont guys. It's not their problem. The problem that I'm going to describe is not Mamaroneck's problem, it's my problem. At Westchester County Airport, if I so much as move a coffee cup from here to here, I have universal opposition. It's instantly determined to be expansion. Instantly. We have an airport terminal that doesn't work anymore for personal flow, right? We need to look at refiguring that terminal and changing its footprint and modernizing it. Notice I didn't use the word expansion, because if I did, I would have 3 or 4 communities around the airport absolutely wildly mad. And I started my first year in this office in 18, having public hearings, and we heard it in Technicolor. 4 or 5 hours of people coming one at the other don't expand yet. So, I don't have the luxury of just saying, hey, land swap, good, do it. Can't do it. I have to have a process. I have to show that that process was deliberative. It looked at all of the environmental issues. It opened up full public debate. During that period of time, Mamaroneckers and Harrison people are worried about the fines. And that's a legitimate worry. So I'm going to try to take that off of their worry list to go to the state officials and the federal officials. Now, I can't get the president on the phone. I can get the governor on the phone for a couple of minutes and say, Governor, please, we're going through the process. We're not delaying it arbitrarily. We believe this will come to closure. Do not fine Westchester Joint Waterworks, because Westchester Joint Waterworks is going to take those fines and raise your bills. So they're going to do it. However, and I've tried to express this to my friends who are in local government here, if I do this with the snap of my fingers and it solves your problem, I create a big-time problem with everything else we have to do with the airport. I have to show people, as I've said all my career, 30 years I've represented this transparency. It's openness. It's a reasonable discussion. And when the land swap happens, if that's where it's going to be, and I think it will turn out that way, we went through an open, deliberative process. We didn't jam it down your throat. That's why it's taking so long.
We have to keep moving. We have a couple of more questions, and I know I don't want to cheat the audience out of their opportunity. So let me give you the first one, which is the immigrant community. We had an influx of immigrants over the last year, and at one point the county had 400 asylum seekers. Can you tell us how many asylum seekers are currently in the county, what services they are being provided with, and by whom, and what has the federal government agreed to provide financial assistance, and if possible, if you can address whether or not your proposal for satellite federal courts to help handle the number of asylum cases is getting any traction.
You know, I'm mindful of the time. I'm going to answer these questions thoroughly. And if I go longer, you'll forgive me because you want a thorough answer to a multiple-headed question. When the migrant situation happened at the border, the governor of Texas, the governor of Florida decided, what a great idea, let's send some of these migrants to progressive states that are claim that they care about migrants, and let's see how they like it. And so buses left the border, heading for not Chattanooga, Tennessee, and not Kansas City, Kansas, but it's sent to New York, Chicago, LA, Philadelphia, and I think Martha's Vineyard. So when the buses came into the Port Authority of New York City happens to have a requirement through a court case that was settled in the late 1970s called the Sullivan case, in which New York City is required to provide shelter for any person that needs shelter overnight. That is the settlement of a court case that applies, and it was determined that this applies in this case. So, as Mayor Adams has said more than a number of times, I guess the number is about 100,000 migrants roughly that's coming to New York City. 150,000 migrants have come into New York City, shipped up to the Texas border. Now, the Texas governor says it's worse at the Texas border. This is clearly a federal issue, not a state issue. I don't blame the states or the cities for having a problem with it. I do think that Texas decided to selectively send everybody to 2 or 3 places to make a political point is wrong. Every place should do a fair share, and you can spread it out across the country. Nebraska needs agricultural workers, but you're not sending it to Nebraska because of political considerations. You're sending it to New York. I worked for a company that was headquartered in Texas for 11 years. When I go down there, they say, where are you from? So I'm from New York. You know that they don't love us down there. Punchline is they come into New York City, and New York City tries to accommodate them as best as they could, and they reach a saturation point. And then Mayor Adams has his people start to communicate with hotels, motels, primarily at a certain market level. And they're not going into the high Regencies. They're going into places where they can get just baseline accommodations. And they start placing them outside of New York City. In every other county, the The county executive issued an executive order, and we don't allow this. This is an emergency, and we use my emergency powers to stop there from happening. It was the only county executive thing to do that. I said, it's a humanitarian problem. We can do our share. We will work with the city of New York. The city of New York is not easy to work with. They had problems, but they didn't exactly make it easy for us to help them. And it took a little while before I got a phone call saying, thank you, George, for being the only county executive that did it. You get past those things. We have now, and have had for about 5 months, 3 placements. They total a little over 400, but it's a movable number. The number goes up, the number goes down. It circles around 400. It's a little above 400 the last I looked at it. It's about 1/3 children, and we have asked them to send us children under the age of 5 that do not require education. Because once you get into education, you're dealing in New York City with a single school district. Out here, you're dealing with 44 school districts. It's a whole other problem of educating. Not every district has the capacity to deal with that many Spanish-speaking children that don't speak English. So we have accepted 3 locations. It's a Yonkers location, an Ardsley location, and a White Plains location. 400 some odd migrants. They've been here for 5 months. There's been no crime, no disease spread. Those are the big arguments that happen. If you remember the rhetoric at the moment, they're going to bring disease, and they're going to be crime, and they're going to do this. And in one incident, somebody did something bad in San Francisco, and everybody is going to behave this way. We didn't take that attitude. With the strong import of Yonkers municipal government, Ardsley, and White Plains municipal governments have been managed to this extent. We, the county, provide Department of Health vaccinations and check to make sure that anybody that's new that's coming in that replaces somebody that leaves has proper vaccinations. And there are many people coming from rural parts of Latin America that have no vaccinations for anything, and we have to go through a whole diagnostic and then proper activity. New York City is paying for the overnight accommodations and for food. The food is dicey. We have had now certain voluntary groups help out, social organizations help complement the baseline of food and other needs at the Ardsley and the White Plains locations. The Yonkers location is managed by West Ham, and they do a very good job. They're Westchester based. We've had Neighbors Link out of Mount Kisco, who works with immigrant issues in general, like Gerandi Martinez and Community Resource Center does here in Mamaroneck, and they've done a particularly good job of working with them. We've had some of the, I think Pace Law School have had volunteers to help folks file papers, because they come here, they're here legally. You hear people say, oh, they're illegal. No, they're legal. They went through the immigration system, they're filing for asylum, and they're waiting for the cases to be heard. And so they are here legally. And they're entitled to move about, they're not under house arrest. If they have another place to stay, they're in New York because they were encouraged to get on a bus and go to New York, and you'll be given housing, and they're in New York now, and some of them may have relatives someplace else and they move there and all that stuff. Let me remind people something I have to remind all the time. In 2018, the Trump administration housed 1,000 migrant children in Westchester County, 4 locations. This is when they had the policy of separating children from their parents at the border. That was not humanitarian. But nonetheless, those children had to be housed someplace, and the federal government contracted with what was then called Rising Sun in Yonkers, Lincolnville Hall in Somers, Children's Village, Abbott House, and had 1,000 kids. And they were here roughly a year, give or take. And in that period of time, there was no crisis. There was no crime, there was no anything. These 1,000, that's more than double the number of migrants that are here now. When that happened, I heard no outcry. When we accepted in those 3 locations, I heard a lot of outcry from people with a certain point of view. And I can't say that you don't have a right to have your point of view. It's a free country, it's democracy. And they're outraged that we didn't try to hold these people from coming into Westchester County. Now the truth of the matter is, these are human beings like anybody else. I've gone to meet some of them with translation assistants. I'm looking at a man, his wife, and his daughter, and they want to work. And they came to America for the same reason that my great-grandfather from Italy came here. He had a lousy life as a peasant in southern Italy, and he wanted to come to a place where he could work and have a better life. He didn't envision that his great-grandson would be the county executive, but he had hoped that his children that he could see would have a better life. And that's exactly why they're here. However, a broken immigration system that has to be fixed in the federal government, I've called for the satellite court, the U.S. District Courthouse in White Plains, create a satellite court, adjudicate cases. I got crickets.
Let me give just one more question, because I think that we really do. I'm sorry. Let me just ask the one final question, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience. And it's about the uptick, if there is an uptick in bias and hate crimes. And this past February, you and District Attorney Miriam Roca announced the creation of a law enforcement portal for the reporting of hate crimes and bias incidents in Westchester. The question is simple: has the county experienced an uptick? And what other steps can the county take to prevent these types of crime and to encourage a more tolerant society?
The sad news is yes, there's been an uptick. There's been a demonstrable increase in anti-Semitic actions. There's an uptick in I'll call it Hispanic, I think it's directed toward the immigrant population. There's an uptick in anti-Asian hatred, and there are signs of racist behavior that has become more prominent. I think in the last 7 to 8 years, some combination of the national political dialogue, people now begin to believe that hate speech is just me expressing free speech. And so more people who hold this hatred now feeling more comfortable saying these things. And I think social media, I hate to damn a platform which is theory neutral in and of itself, but I think social media allows you to say whatever it is you want to say in whatever way you want to say it. And by repetition, it becomes acceptable. I tell you frankly, I got off of Twitter. I never go on Nextdoor. I know people are commenting all the time, me and other people. It's just too much. It's just too much. And it manifests itself in actions. Swastika is placed someplace. You know, what's happened in the last couple of months, there's clearly more anti-Semitism. I happen to be part of every majority group that you could think of. White, male, straight, old, right-handed. I got the whole pack. I am just the majority. And yet, in my family, I heard stories, I didn't ever experience it, but I heard stories of antecedents who suffered anti-Irish bias and anti-Italian bias. Those two ethnicities are pretty much incorporated into the American mainstream these days. But the stories were told, no Irish would apply, Italians were called wops and dagos and worse. And so I kind of thought we were getting past this. I thought wrong. Because now that the portals of hatred have been made more acceptable, we have more of it. We have a more vigorous Human Rights Commission now. We revitalized the Human Rights Commission and education programs. But education is for the coalition of the willing. The people that attend these sessions are people who already have a sense of wanting to reach out beyond their own demographic. How we reach the people who hold those hatreds and sit in their house watching a certain thing on TV and stew and then express it some night when they're, in a parking lot to somebody who left a car that they don't like, flash a tire. It's hard to get to. I turn to the police departments and, of course, maybe Roca as a DA to prosecute the obvious cases of it. But because I am straight, I don't see what a gay person is. Because I have an Anglo demeanor, I don't see if I were Asian, and I looked Asian, and I looked Latino, how somebody looks at me in those microaggressions. I don't see that. And so it is going to be very difficult for us to have a more substantive response. We do things that bring us together. This community's got a great interfaith community, but it's hard. I don't have an answer for that question that is acceptable.
Well, I think we're going to stop with our questions. There's only a couple, but I do want to turn this over to Rena so that we can have a question and answer period. If you have a question for the county exec, please raise your hand. Rena will. She'll handle this.
I'll be the mic carrier. I will take your mic.
And you can share my mic.
The torch has been passed. Before we go to Q&A, we're going to allow 15 minutes for Q&A, so I suppose that hard rules are meant to be bent a little bit. So we will allow our standard 15 minutes. So I apologize for breaking our hard
required. Thank you, George, for such thorough and complete answers. I'm always amazed by the amount of information that you can hold in your head. It's truly remarkable coming from somebody who goes to the supermarket and forgets to buy eggs. Yes.
Could you just state your name and where you're?
My name is Malcolm Froman. I live in Larchmont, and my question has to do with my current interest, which is being involved with the Larchmont Mamaroneck Hunger Task Force. I'm the president. George, needless to say, my ears perked up when you alluded to some county funding for food insecurity. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, we've worked directly, Malcolm, with Feeding Westchester, and we have, over the course from the pandemic to now, we've allocated direct money to try to assist in helping. It's not enough to do all the things that are necessary, but Feeding Westchester has been sort of the conduit to supply food to all of the different pantries and services, and we think that is a critical effort, and the allocation of this budget is $1.3 million. Unfortunately, I mean, I could justify in my mind spending more because I see the rising need, but the limits of what we have limit us to that kind of a number. We've also done, through the CDBG program, we did something with Portchester, and it was a Portchester-Ossining combined effort, to create a mobile food truck, which now can go out beyond a singular pantry location in Portchester and go to different locations where people can come almost the way you go to a food truck. Like when Walter's food truck comes, you go and you have, whatever you want to have. That this food truck comes and you can get items that way. That seems to me to be an interesting innovation, and if through the CDBG program we could have more of those work with pantries, I think that would be an expansion. So, and we have this problem in New Rochelle where the pantries are located, not necessarily right where the accessible neighborhood that needs it is. So to me, that would be something that we would work through the CDBG program. Now, that's not our money, that's federal money that comes down to us, and we're the conduit working with municipalities. So I would say, if you think something like that is an expansion of your services, then we'd have a conversation, and we'll work through village, town, whatever, whichever of the communities are in the CDBG consortium. I think all three are, if I'm not mistaken. And that might be a way to expand food insecurity assessment.
Sure, thank you.
Can I add two things first?
Sure.
We created the position of a food security coordinator. That's been very effective in working with pantries. And the county executive announced, unfortunately on the day of another flood, grants, $1 million of grants to pantries. So we have worked very, very closely with this infrastructure, and by Larchmont and Mamaroneck, I think both being part of the county consortium, that enables them to access CDBG funding as well. So we'll make sure that you're on all the lists, and we certainly appreciate the work that
You know where to find us.
I'm giving people the mic so our recording picks it up.
I just wanted to remind everybody that this is a compostable facility. These are compostable cups, so they go there and not in the garbage. And George, that's the question I have for you. What is the county doing to help encourage people, all the municipalities, to do more in compostables? And one of the question is about New Rochelle, all of the building in New Rochelle, where is that sewage going to go? My name is Marlene Colbert, and I live in Larchmont.
The second question first, more direct. Everything in New Rochelle goes to the New Rochelle wastewater treatment plant, which is located just south of Salesian, on the other side of Fox Island Road, which goes down, Five Island Road, which goes down to Five Island Park. That sewer treatment plant had an expansion a couple of years ago. It has additional capacity. The buildings that are being built in New Rochelle at this point, those that are on the books, that sewer treatment plant has the capacity to accept the sewage that would be generated by those buildings. What keeps happening in New Rochelle, I don't know, and I don't know that I could predict that in 5 years, if the rate of growth continues, that we wouldn't need a further expansion, which would be very expensive. But right now, the New Rochelle treatment plant takes in what comes out of those buildings and can handle those buildings when they're fully occupied at this point. The other question about recycling, we put a lot of time and effort into our recycling efforts. We created a program up at our Valhalla campus called Compost Ed. in which we created a composting site, which is a model that can be used by other municipalities. And we've had some success with White Plains, notably in helping them. They had their own initiative to do more composting on site in the communities. In an ideal world, you don't need a countywide composting site for food scraps and so forth if you have the land. But a lot of Westchester municipalities south of 287 don't have the land. Larchmont doesn't, and other communities don't as well. So we have been trying to figure out how to help in getting the food compost piece out of the waste stream. The standard areas of composting we've expanded. We now have textile recycling capacity. We have a number of other different products that we didn't have before. Scarsdale has done a particularly good job of municipal recycling at a higher level. The greater problem that we have in recycling, frankly, is from the larger communities. The smaller communities do a better job percentage-wise of recycling numbers. The larger the community, the more multi-family buildings, the more we have people who are in poverty, we have less recycling. And we have to work on an education component to go along with the capacity component. Because I see, in certain parts of the county where we have high population, minimal recycling. It's a big effort in Larchmont, Mamaroneck Village, and Mamaroneck Town, but it's not as big an effort in the bigger cities. That's the area of improvement. And then, of course, technology, will show us ways to produce products that are more compostable. That's more recyclable. That's the other side of the coin. And I watch I'm empty nested now. It's two of us. We don't generate a lot of garbage as we once did, but we still have garbage generated because the basic stuff we buy is super packaged and plastics and things that aren't recyclable. And again, I'm not trying to buck everything off to another level of government. There's things I'm talking about that we have to do better. But there has to be some kind of national understanding of what we do in that regard. And there's a question here about carbon footprint. I'm going to graft onto it for this. It's not recycling, but it's also about environment. We have gotten rid of diesel buses in Westchester County. I think that's a major improvement. 300 plus buses, they're now electric or electric hybrid. That you don't get the air pollution blast of diesel exhaust when they pull out of the bus stop. They run much more efficiently with electric as part of what they do. We spend a lot less money on fossil fuels. It's not a fully electric system, but it's electric hybrid, which is an improvement over what we had before. And we have now spent a lot of money in putting in EV charging stations on county land. And we now have a program just in this budget that sets aside $25 million on it, that we set aside for the program for EV charging. And it's a program where a municipality can come to us and get some funding to help them expand their EV thing. So, the town, 2 villages, you have your own programs you're already leading on the way. Come to the county, we give you money, do more. And out of that process, that's also part of Marlene trying to have a more healthy environment.
Thank you. I'll get to you next, I promise.
Hi, George. Could you explain it's Catherine Hiller from Mamaroneck. And I would like you to explain your decision to run for Congress.
Well, I'm happy to talk about that, but I think what I'd like to do, Catherine, if you don't mind, is take any other county questions so that we complete the county question portion of it, and then if you'd like, and if the leaders prefer that we'll talk about that on camera, then when you end this, as I'm moving, I'll still address it so that you understand what my thought is.
Thank you, George. Yes.
Thank you, George. Frank Clemens, Larchmont, I grew up in Pelham in the 40s. It's a very, very simple question, and it should be a very, very simple answer. My insecurity is fear driving on the Hutchinson River Parkway. I've had cars pass me going 80 miles an hour. Okay, I'm sure a lot of other people have had that. Very simple fix. Cameras on the bridges, and then enforce the law. Heavy fines, take away the license, we solve the problem, and it doesn't cost the county a penny.
Frank, there's a two-part element to the hutch. The part that the county has, it is county police that police the parkway. And so to the extent that we have allocation of 2 vehicles to do that policing, one that handles the southern part of the hutch and one that handles sort of the northern part of the hutch. I'm not sure, I think the dividing line is Mamaroneck Avenue exit. We have, professionals who try to police what you're talking about. I drive a hutch almost every day, I see it. Fortunately, I also see it in Salt Mill, I see it in Forest County, I see it on Taconic, I see it on the Bronx River. And we are the policing agency for those things. So to the extent that we have the ability to add resources, we can do that. The other portion, though, what you're talking about is beyond our authority. The state authorizes any electronic devices. We have to go to the state to get authority, and they're very reticent to give us the authority to put up speed cameras or any other kind of cameras that would help us in the enforcement of what we do. And the hutch is owned by the state. All the parkways, with the exception of the Bronx River Parkway, are owned by the state of New York. They administer the Department of Transportation. The Bronx River Parkway is owned by Westchester County. But even then, we still have to go to the state DOT for authority to do what you suggested, which is cameras. You're welcome to put that thought in writing to me if you'd like. I'll give you my personal email address. I'll tell you why I want you to put it in writing. LatimerGeorge@gmail.com. Anybody, LatimerGeorge, no punctuation, @gmail.com. Because I'm going to take your email, I'm going to share it with my friends in the state. And I'm going to say, this is an example of what some folks think we should have the authority to do. Let me feel your pulse. Are you willing to give us the authority to look at doing like something like that? And if it requires special legislation, or if it is something that the DOT has the authority to administratively grant us in order for us to better police the roads.
Alan Carter, Larchmont. When you opened, you talked about revenues other than the tax revenues. I'd like you to, we see more movies being shot here, for instance, and things coming in. Talk a little bit about your economic development efforts that have brought more revenue to the area.
Well, our economic development program, Bridget Gibbs is our Director of Economic Development, have really complemented what's happening in the private sector, Alan. We've tried to be realistic in terms of what economic development means in this day and age. There was a time when economic development was trying to get a major U.S. corporation based in Manhattan to come out to Westchester. And during that era, the 60s and early 70s, when IBM, PepsiCo, a host of companies came out here, big economic boost for Westchester County. That's not what's happening anymore. So we use the tools at our fingertips to try to help grow companies. On the large side of it, the economic development, the IDA, the aforementioned IDA, has been used to help Regeneron in an expansion and Morgan with an expansion. I think one is about 750 additional jobs, the other is about 500 additional jobs, something like that. And we helped. I'm not saying we were the driving force behind it. The vision of those two companies to expand was there. We assisted them in being able to do that. Most of our economic development now is focused on smaller size companies to grow, to stay here to grow. And we've had some reasonable success. And in that, we work with Westchester County Association and the Business Council of Westchester. We've also put a lot of energy into chambers of commerce. As we're sitting here, the Larchmont Chamber of Commerce is having a meeting right now. If I get out of here in time, I'll get on by Zoom. If I don't, I don't. But we spent money during COVID to try to help prop up some of those chambers of commerce when they didn't have any revenue stream, so that we keep that going. We've identified certain sectors for which Westchester has some attractiveness to it. Financial services, advanced manufacturing, there's a couple of other areas as well. And we provided some incentives, and we've worked with those organizations on specific, those businesses on specific things they might need, regulatory, lifting certain regulatory things in order to help them expand. We've also used our economic development efforts to try to match up potential employees with job opportunities, because a lot of businesses right now are having an employee recruitment problem. And something's happening in the society that's unusual, that I haven't experienced. I think we all may feel this way, particularly if you're of a certain age. Since COVID, there has been an unwillingness for the workforce to fully return. I don't quite know what people are doing when they're not working, but for some reason, it's very hard for businesses to find the right person. So we're trying to match that need with certain job fairs that we have in certain businesses. A lot of it is true in the restaurant industry, in the supermarket industry, at that level. The overall thrust of the economic development plans, when it works in harmony with the business community, has given Westchester a better bounce back than most of the surrounding counties in terms of what we've come back from COVID. We unfortunately, for the larger picture, benefited from what happened in COVID in the city. People wanted to be out of the city, both in business and residential. And we have right now, if anybody's a real estate agent, we have an unbelievable demand to be in this county and not sufficient supply to be able to meet it. That's part of the affordability problem, but it's just part of an availability problem. So it does tell me that the economic strength of Westchester has been coming back. And with all of that, we have had very robust results on our property taxes. Even though we've kept them, we've lowered them and then kept them stable, we have had no in-rem problems like some of the other counties in upstate have. We've had steady revenue flow. We have had a reduction in the mortgage recording tax money because properties are moving. People who own a home and might think about downsizing and moving aren't moving because they don't know where they're going to go to, unless they're going to retirement in another part of the country. So we've seen a reduction in the mortgage recording side. Where we've seen the great explosion in revenue is on the sales tax side. We now have more sales tax revenue than we have property tax revenue. A lot. And that has gotten us through. In fact, most recently, 5 years ago, when we equalized the sales tax around the county, so that was the same everywhere, we shared back a significant percentage. So both villages in the town got an influx of money. They didn't do anything other than just see the sales tax revenue go like this. But it was a significant amount of money shared back, and we benefited from that as well. We shared some of it with the schools, but the schools are financed with a more difficult formula, as you know. And what additional we could give them, was helpful but not decisive. I think for the villages in the town, it was a significantly helpful thing. We've also had, as you would point out, revenue from certain sources. The numbers are fairly small. We have exploded in the amount of filming that we've had in this county. It's amazing. We fall within a certain radius of the city, and so there's a benefit to those companies to film in those radiuses so they can get street scenes in Yonkers, a private house in White Plains, and film a sitcom or film a movie theater, and we've had a lot of that here. The local governments get the primary benefit of the fees that they pay, but all of the other ancillary businesses, the catering, somebody stays overnight, blah, 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 all of that goes with that. But it's still a relatively small revenue stream. We've had a hit in our hotel occupancy tax numbers from what we had before. Surprisingly, not because of the leisure travel, but because of the business travel. And businesses now are holding less meetings. Organizations are holding less conventions. I think Zoom has replaced some of those sessions. And so we've lost a couple of hotels. Those that remain have survived with some occupancy just because of the diminution in the number of rooms. But in places like New Rochelle, White Plains that have hotel tax revenue streams, those streams have been diminished. So it's across the board, different types of things. The macro picture, sales tax revenue is very high, allowing us to moderate property taxes.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm sorry there wasn't time for everyone's questions. As George has said, he's provided his email. I also want to thank Larry Thaler, who is, Larry Thal, a member of our board who provided the filming services, Nina for doing such a great job in moderating, and for all of you for being here, and of course to WJC for so generously providing their facilities. Thank you very much.